Good morning. Right, so today I am going to talk about the three modes of driving in the hybrid, in the Honda Jazz hybrid. And those three modes, main modes, are EV, which is electric, so the battery is charging, the battery is charged, and that battery is driving the motor that's driving the wheels. Right, so the next one is hybrid. Now this is where the engine is driving the generator, and the generator is driving the motor, and any spare goes obviously into the battery. That's basically the hybrid mode. There's a few in between modes that I'm not going to bother discussing, so it's just a case of slightly split what happens to the excess power obviously goes into the battery. Then the third mode is engine mode. Now a little clutch then attaches the engine direct to the drive wheels, and as far as I can see, that's the only mode in which the engine is working as it would in a normal car. Now you may have noticed that if you drive the Honda Jazz, if you go up a steep hill, you don't have to be going particularly fast, but if you're going uphill, so therefore there is a load an extra load on the engine, then you'll notice it kind of over revs, and this is mentioned in all the reviews, but no particular explanation as to why that's happening. And I think that basically what's happening there is you're still in hybrid mode, and the engine turns the generator, which then drives the electric motor, and it's not over revving. When you come from a normal car, when an engine revs highly like that, it usually means you're in the wrong gear, or you're in the top gear and driving extremely fast. So the engine revs will just pick up, and you'll hear that engine noise in any normally aspirated car, so a car that's not hybrid or electric. Now in the Jazz hybrid, this can happen at fairly low speeds. High revs will suddenly appear, possibly when you're going up even a mild incline or whatever, and it's quite worrying for a normal driver, because you think, oh well, the automatic gearbox is not working properly or something like that. Now the way the Jazz hybrid works, it's a CVT, so it's got like a variomatic gearbox. It's basically run by a chain. Doesn't have to be a chain, I mean it can be some sort of composite material, but it's effectively a chain, and that chain sits between two, for want of a better word, cones, and as the load changes, and these are often driven by oil pressure, as the load changes, what tends to happen is the chain, it will go up and down the cone of the chain will go up and down the cone, and that will change the rate, and there are two cones, and that will change the ratio between those two cones, and then that effectively then changes the gear ratio. So that's how kind of that works. Now might not be entirely technically correct with the Honda Jazz, but generally that's how a variomatic gearbox works, and this variomatic gearbox obviously gives you more than 5, 6, 10, 20 different gear ratios. They always say it's infinite, but obviously it's not infinite, but there might be 50 or 100 different different places that ratio can change, so it will change in very tiny steps. So you should always be getting, in that kind of car, you should always be getting the correct gear ratio for your speed and load. Now, and that's why I come back to the, when you get this high revving, even if you're going relatively slow up a hill, there's a 4-to-1 ratio between the engine revolutions and the generator that's spinning. So if suddenly you're doing 5,000 revs or 4,000 revs, then the generator is spinning at between 16,000 and 20,000 revs. So that, I mean, that's fast, and that will generate in this kind of setup a lot of power. That power will drive the motor, and hence that you've got your hybrid. So what I've done is I'm video recording what the engine management system is telling me what the engine is doing. So, i.e. switching between those 3 modes. There's more than 3 modes, but the in-between modes are things like the engine is driving the wheels and charging the battery. That's a kind of a separate mode in itself if you look in the handbook. But all I'm particularly interested in is what it's doing and when it's doing it. Now, there's a YouTube video where the guy is explaining, and this guy's an expert from Honda. I think he's the chief engineer in Honda Europe, or the chief design engineer Honda Europe. And what he's saying is basically from 0 to 25 miles an hour, you're getting electric mode. From 25 to 50, it's in hybrid mode. From 50 to 75, then it goes into engine mode. You can tell that on this graphic that I'll intersperse with the video. A little clutch appears, and that clutch is basically telling you that the engine is driving the wheels. When that clutch is not in place, the engine obviously can still be turning, and it will be, but it will be doing other things. So it'll be spinning the generator to generate electricity for the motor and or the battery. So it will be charging the battery with any excess. Even if you're still on your car park or parking place, then you will see, if you put this graphic up, and you can get it by pressing home on the steering wheel and then switching using the roller to move upwards 1. I'm not going to drive like this normally, because that sort of information is not normally of interest to me. But for the benefit of this video, I'm recording exactly what it's doing, and you will hear every so often that the revs will suddenly increase from the engine, but it's still not. But the little clutch in the middle is still not there. So all that's doing is it's just driving the generator. And this happens actually in practice most of the time, I've noticed, until you go out onto the motorway. But even on the motorway, you can still be doing 70 miles an hour and it will still be in hybrid mode. If it's flat, there's no weight on the car, so you're not going up a hill, and so on and so forth. So it's not as clear cut as the video description said. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about this on various groups that I've subscribed to. The Honda Jazz Facebook group, which is a good group, by the way, if you're thinking of getting in the car. But you always get, whatever you write, there will always be somebody that will disagree or give it a much better opinion, whatever. I'm not an engineer, and never want to be, by the way. I've got a sense of humour, but effectively, there's been this cross discussion. So I posted the video onto that group, and then there's a lot of feedback, and the feedback was saying, well, it doesn't work that way in practice. Fair enough, and that's what this video is about, to try. I've read what the expert says, and obviously this expert is not he's basically not telling you exactly what happens, but he's giving the idea and the principle behind it using these speeds, so I can understand that. In reality, you will see from this video that the engine management system is constantly changing the drive mode. So at the moment it'll be in electric mode. I mean, you can tell, to be honest, you get used to a car and you can tell by ear what it's doing. Then as I accelerate, eventually the battery power will deplete. And once that's depleted, clearly the engine's then the petrol engine's then got to somehow regenerate that power. And it does it through the generator. There is no other way. Well, not quite. There is another way. When you're going down a long hill or a steep hill, then this graphic will show that, and they're probably showing it now because I'm braking slowly and going downhill. So what will then happen is the wheels, the turning of the wheels will generate, will obviously turn the generator, which will then generate power to top up the battery. So it's constantly changing depending on the terrain, the speed you're doing, the load in the car, possibly wind, so it has to work harder, maybe a tailwind assist in that sense, you know, and so on and so forth. So it's really clever, and it's not you know, it's not clear cut, that's for sure. As you can see, it will be constantly using the best mode it can depending on the torque, the load on the car, and so on. Now, when I've driven this for about 3,500 miles, and I've noticed that petrol consumption, I mean, it's really good if you're in town. But thinking about it, when you're driving in traffic like I am doing at the moment, it's stop and start. So you're constantly having to overcome the weight of the car momentum just to get going, and then you're slowing down and stopping again. So, and I'm still getting like mid-60s to late 60s miles to the gallon. Now that's partially obviously because it's driving in either electric or battery mode. But in stop-start driving, I would, if I compare that to my old car, which was a Peugeot 2008, which had a 1.2 turbo engine in it, and it was quite economical. I mean, it would do a long trip, 43 miles to the gallon, 43, 44 miles to the gallon. But around town, that would drop to 35, 36. So to get 65 to 67, which what I've been seeing in local driving, it's pretty good. And on long journeys, it can depend. So I've done a few videos of long journeys, and basically a long journey, if you drive at 56, which I've done, and that's very painful to do because you're in amongst the lorries, and you're not, and nobody's really happy with you, to be fair, when you do that, because you're in and out all the time. I don't care what anybody else thinks, as long as it's safe. I do make the transition safely and so on, but it's difficult to drive on a UK motorway at 56, which is the reason I practically got up, I think, 4 o'clock in the morning to try and avoid most of that, and I did do, and I got just short of 80 miles to gallon. I was hoping to get 80 as part of a kind of a challenge. In the end, I got 79.4 on a 285 mile journey, which is pretty good. Then of course you've got 60 miles per hour I set on the second journey I did, and that's 60 miles per hour journey, by the way. That's 4 miles per hour difference, and the petrol consumption dropped to 67. If you do it at 70 miles an hour, which I have done, average, so that's what I've set, it's mostly motorway, that's what I've set the adaptive cruise to, then I was getting 54. So as you can see, there's only, so 54 to 60, you lose 13 miles to the gallon. 60 to 70, then you're going from nearly 80 miles to the gallon to 54. So that's 26, hold on, yeah, 26. So you lose 26 miles to the gallon by driving at 70. So it kind of, I wouldn't say it's not necessarily going off a cliff, but it certainly nosedives. Now if you do 50 you can get up to 100. Now in times like these where although oil prices are dropping at the moment, at times where oil prices gas and electricity prices are very high, it wouldn't be a bad idea to limit the speeds on the motorways just during this period. And there's more petrol to go around. Obviously demand will fall, you know, and so on and so forth, but I doubt they will do that. So there we are. So we've got that's kind of moving off in electric mode, and it's very fast, by the way, because basically what you're doing is you're basically getting you know, it's not as powerful an electric motor as a Tesla, but what you're getting there is no lag at all. So you'd have to have a real muscle car, although these days they're all tiny engines, can produce a lot of power, but you'll have to have a lot of power to get the kind of acceleration from a smaller engine, for example. So this car will burn off some pretty hefty cars from the lights. Not that I do that, but it can burn off a lot of power. A much bigger car at the lights, but not for long. Either the battery will deplete or the generator will kick in off the engine, and then it will be quite quite a dramatic slowdown. Right, I'm going up a really steep hill here. I'm at 30 miles an hour, which is the speed limit. Now you can hear the revs on the engine kick in there, or I can, and believe me, they have done. And that's your engine there now turning the generator. I'm not sure whether it's in engine mode. Well, I don't think it is because of the high revs. So that's your engine turning your generator. So let's say that's 4,000 revs. It's turning the generator 16,000 revs per minute. So that's generating quite a lot of power. That goes to the motor, and any excess that's not required by the motor then will go to charge up the battery. Right, so I'm stopping for the lights. So I've got power in the battery now. So when I'm driving, right, here we go. When I'm driving slowly, and if I tickle the clutch, then it's in electric. You know it's in electric mode. Then you can hear. This is quite a rough road, but it's driving it from the battery, from what I can see. And then when it does that, obviously it's more economical. So I'm going onto a faster road now, where eventually I'll be able to get up to 60 miles an hour. Go on. I've got a guy dawdling at the lights. So it's still using, right, I know, and this always happens, right? So when you get that's quite a steep incline, and then of course the engine kicks in with the high revs. Right, so I can do 40 now, so let's just click this. Now we've got super high revs. So we've got the battery, from what I can see. I can't see the display because I've put the GoPro in front of the display, but I can see the picture that it's collecting, if you know what I mean. I'm going to put that down because there's a few roundabouts here, and basically let me negotiate these. I'm going to be a bit heavy-footed now, and not because I normally drive this way, but it's because I want to try and get the engine management system to do different things. So here comes another roundabout. So this is your typical driving, really. Most people don't drive, well, on motorways. I mean, some obviously reps do. But if you've got a car like this, you're not doing most of your driving, but you are doing driving on stuff like this. Right, I can do 60 here, so I'm going to take it up to 60. Then let's see what the engine management system does. It's a bit undulating, so I'm guessing it's going to be switching about. Right, so I've got adaptive cruise on. This guy's slowed me down a bit, but we're going into an uphill stretch. Devon's like that. It's got lots of rolling hills, so you're up and down all the time. Where I'm from, Peak District, you've got a kind of a similar thing, but it tends to be less undulating, and the roads are more in the valleys, kind of thing. You must be doing about 100. So it's a little bit different driving experience. But I should be able to get enough video clips of this graphic, which tells you what the engine management system is doing, enough to put together hopefully a useful video, and I'll stick it on YouTube. I do these things out of interest. I'm not a YouTube reviewer star or whatever, influencer, which I always thought was quite a funny term. But I do like doing the videos, and some of the feedback has been very positive. Of course, you always get somebody that is basically criticising everything somebody does, but that's life. I'm thick-skinned, but my attitude is if one person finds it useful, then it's worth the effort. And it is my take on it. I don't design cars. I've driven a lot of them. But I do enjoy, I must admit, I do enjoy doing videos and reading up about the topic as well. Some people think that's boring. There's one guy on the Facebook group, I think he's a drummer, and his comment was something along the lines of, I've had more fun discussing how much they've made on the house price increases in his London property. Well, what can you do? Right, so I'm going into town now, so it should be more electric. I mean, I haven't seen these myself yet, so I'm looking forward to watching the video of the graphic. I mean, it's not something I would put on in normal driving, because it's distracting for a start. And it's not going to change the way I drive. I'm not particularly heavy right-footed. I used to be, but now I've no interest. Or sorry, it's not that I've got no interest. I've learned over the years that if you put your foot down, you don't really get anywhere faster, or not significant. I mean, you get somewhere faster. You get to the next traffic jam faster. So I guess if you're a bit neurotic, that might help to calm your nerves. But from my perspective, I've always found that, in fact, I did get stopped once on Tinsley Bridge, just near Sheffield, by it was actually like a police lorry, and in those days, they would give you a pep talk. They wouldn't necessarily. These days, you just get fined. It'd be a camera anyway, probably. You get fined, you get 3 points. But back in those days, they'd pull you over, ask where you're going, what's the rush. And I was driving my dad's car. I didn't have a car at the time, and he had a big Rover Sterling, which was super powerful. And I must have been, obviously I was going over the speed limit. Anyway, he pulled me over, and he asked me where I was going. I was going to a wedding. I wasn't particularly late, but anyway, and he just said, look, you know, you're going to save, if you drive at 90 miles an hour rather than 70, you're going to save yourself 16 minutes, and that's if you don't stop, obviously. And it kind of brings it home to you that he's right, actually. And in my experience since, that's always been the case. When I've had some, you know, big powerful cars and I didn't hang around, especially in Germany, it doesn't get you anywhere any faster. Or it might do, but it might be a case of 10 minutes. 10 minutes quicker. I mean, if that's important to you, then fine. I mean, I guess on some journeys it might well be. But if you drive, most of the driving I do is travelling from Sheffield to London, and basically I end up whatever speed I do, it takes the same amount of time roughly, and I've done that in this car. So I stay in Surrey quite a bit, so that's M1, M25, and whatever the last bit is, a couple of miles off the M25, and it takes me about 3 hours. And it takes me, if I drive as fast as I can, it takes me 3 hours. If I drive at 60 in this, which I've done once, it takes me approximately 3 hours, give or take a few minutes, I guess. Possibly 10 minutes slower, whatever. I don't do it with a stopwatch, but it kind of, in the end, when you travel around for, I mean, I must have done 1 million miles over the years, and you just realise that in actual fact it makes no difference to your day, or even if it takes an extra half hour on a long journey. Well, you know, it's not that half hour doesn't make any difference for the extra stress it causes you, because driving fast is stressful. And I've done this averaged about 170 miles an hour between Frankfurt and Heidelberg. When you're driving that fast, if somebody else is driving fast, you know, some big Audi doing, I don't know, 120, they don't look in the mirrors because they just assume that they're going to be the fastest guy on the road. So you're constantly stressed looking at the right-hand lanes. Of course, you can even get flashed at that speed in Germany, but it's never happened to me. But you're just constantly looking at the right-hand lanes, hoping that somebody doesn't just pull out without looking. So it's quite stressful. But even if you drive at 70 miles an hour, it's a lot more stress than driving at 60. Because at 60, you're in the inside lane, you have to overtake lorries now and again, and a couple of other slow cars who are doing the same as you, or less. But come the end of the journey, once you've put, you know, cruise, adaptive cruise, lane keep and assist, which I always use, and I've never used them before on previous cars that have had them, but on this car I use it because it just makes the journey safer, less stressful, and at the end of the journey I'm refreshed. Because if I did the same journey and I'm racing around, getting stuck behind somebody that's slowing the overtaking lane, or the third lane as they call it now, you know, and so on and so forth, and then you've just got, you know, that stress just builds up. And at the end of the journey you're mentally exhausted. Well, that might be an exaggeration, but you're certainly more stressed out. Whereas in this, you put all these aids on. You still keep an eye on the road, obviously, but it's just everything's just much less stress. and this journey might take me 5 hours or 5.5 hours, whatever it is. But at the end of it, I'm completely relaxed. And I suppose that's what it should all be about. There's never a journey I need to go on anymore. Hasn't always been the case, but there's never a journey I need to go on anymore where it's important that I get there within half an hour or an hour difference. So if I'm driving down here, if it takes me 5 hours or 7 hours, it doesn't make any difference. Just had to nip in there quickly. There's very rarely a space here. Right. There we go. Right, I'm going to leave it there. Right, so hopefully when I've edited this, what I'll do is I'll put in the talky bits, my waffle, with the interspersed with what the GoPro has shown, and hopefully that's picked it up nicely on the screen. Well, I've done my best anyway, with a little bit of cardboard and sellotape. So I'll call it a day, and hopefully you'll find this useful.